The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond. In the year 2347, they finally had their answer. And the answer was terrifying. Admiral Jack Morrison stood alone on the observation deck of his ship, the Defiance. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Terran Navy for 35 years. He had seen many things in that time, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw on the holographic display in front of him. The message had arrived 3 hours ago. It came on every human frequency at the same time. Every ship, every colony, every communication device on Earth received it together. The sender was the Voldari Dominion, the oldest and most powerful empire in the known galaxy. The Voldari were reptilian creatures who had ruled the galaxy for over 40,000 years. They were ancient when humanity was still living in caves. They had destroyed dozens of species that displeased them. They had burned entire worlds to ash. And now they had turned their attention to Earth. Jack read the message again, hoping he had misunderstood. He had not. The message was simple. Humanity was declared a contamination, a disease that needed to be removed from the galaxy. The Voldari had assembled a fleet of 8,000 warships at the edge of human space. Earth had 30 days to surrender completely. Every human would become a slave of the Dominion. Those who refused would die. After 30 days, if humanity did not surrender, every human world would be destroyed. Every man, woman, and child would be killed. The human species would be erased from existence. The door behind Jack opened. Commander Laura Briggs walked in. She was younger than Jack, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. She had been his second in command for 5 years. He trusted her more than anyone else in the fleet. Laura stood beside him and looked at the display. Her face was pale. "The intelligence reports confirm it," she said. 8,000 ships. Maybe more. It is the largest fleet the Voldari have assembled in 10,000 years. Jack nodded slowly. "What about the Galactic Concord?" "What are they saying?" The Galactic Concord was the alliance of spacefaring species in the galaxy. Humanity had joined it 50 years ago as its newest and smallest member. Jack had hoped that the other species would help defend Earth. He had hoped wrong. Laura pulled up another display. The Helix Collective has offered to take 10,000 human refugees. They say they cannot do more without angering the Voldari. The Crystalline Assembly released a statement expressing deep concern. The Marsh Confederation says they will pray for us. Everyone else is staying silent. Jack laughed, but there was no humor in it. 10,000 refugees. Out of 42 billion humans. How kind of them. "They are afraid," Laura said. "They have seen what the Voldari do to species that oppose them. They do not want to be next. So they will watch us die instead." Laura did not answer. There was nothing to say. On Earth, the response was chaos. People filled the streets in every major city. Some were crying. Some were screaming. Some were praying to gods that seemed very far away. The news networks played the Voldari message on repeat. Experts came on television to explain what it meant. But everyone already knew what it meant. It meant death. President Daniel Carter sat in the emergency bunker beneath the White House. He was a calm man, known for his steady voice and careful decisions. But even he felt fear crawling up his spine as he looked at the reports on his desk. His advisors sat around the table, their faces showing various stages of grief and panic. "We could try to negotiate," said Secretary of State Andrew Mills. "Perhaps if we offer them something valuable, they will spare some of us." "You do not negotiate with the Voldari," said Admiral Morrison, who was attending the meeting through holographic projection. "I have studied their history. They do not make deals. They do not show mercy. When they say they will destroy us, they mean it. Then what do you suggest? Andrew asked. We cannot fight them. Our entire fleet is less than 500 ships. They have 8,000. The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity could not win a war against the Valdari. No one could. President Carter stood up and walked to the window. Even underground, the bunker had screens that showed the sky above. He looked at the stars that humanity had worked so hard to reach. When I was a boy, he said quietly, my grandfather told me a story. He said that when the first humans faced extinction, when the ice covered the earth and food was scarce, they did not give up. They fought. They adapted. They survived. He said that was what made humans special. Not our intelligence, not our tools, our refusal to die. He turned back to face the room. I did not call this meeting to discuss surrender. I did not call it to discuss negotiation. I called it to discuss our response. The advisors looked at each other in confusion. Sir, Andrew said carefully, with respect, we have no response. We cannot fight 8,000 warships. President Carter smiled. It was a strange smile, cold and knowing. That is what the galaxy believes. That is what the Valdari believe. And we worked very hard to make them believe it. He pressed a button on the table. The holographic display changed to show a classified file that none of the advisors had ever seen before. The file was labeled Omega Protocol. Defense Secretary Michelle Torres stepped forward. She was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had kept this secret for 20 years, waiting for the day it would be needed. That day had come. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, for the past 150 years, humanity has been hiding something. While we smiled and traded with the galaxy, while we played the role of the young and harmless species, we were preparing for this exact moment. She activated the display. What appeared made several people in the room gasp. The galaxy thinks they know humanity, Michelle continued. They think we are weak. They think we are prey. They are about to learn how wrong they are. The room stared at the display in stunned silence. Everything they thought they knew about their own civilization had just changed. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 8,000 Valdari warships continued their slow approach toward Earth, completely unaware of the surprise that awaited them. The truth about humanity's secret had its roots in the early days of first contact, when human ships first met alien vessels 180 years ago. There had been celebration on Earth. People danced in the streets. Scientists wept with joy. Religious leaders spoke of a new chapter in creation. Humanity believed they were joining a community of peaceful explorers, a fellowship of species united by curiosity and cooperation. They were wrong. The first human diplomats learned the truth quickly. Ambassador George Palmer was among them. He was sent to observe a meeting of the Galactic Concord, to learn how the galaxy worked before humanity officially joined. What he saw changed him forever. The Valdari representative stood before the assembly. He was tall and covered in dark green scales. His eyes were yellow and cold like a snake. He spoke about a species called the Kethrani, who had apparently broken some minor trade agreement. George watched in horror as the Valdari announced that the Kethrani homeworld had been sterilized. 9 billion lives ended in a single afternoon. The representative spoke about it the way someone might discuss removing weeds from a garden. There was no anger in his voice, no regret, just cold, simple fact. The other species in the chamber said nothing. Some looked away. Others nodded as if this was normal, because for them it was normal. This was how the galaxy worked. The Valdari ruled. Everyone else obeyed. Those who did not obey were destroyed. George returned to Earth and made his report. The celebration stopped. The joy turned to fear, and the fear turned to determination. Humanity made a choice that day. They would smile at the galaxy. They would trade and cooperate and play the role of the friendly young species. But in secret, they would prepare. They would build weapons. They would develop technology. They would make sure that when the day came, when the Valdari turned their cold eyes toward Earth, humanity would be ready. That was how the Omega Protocol was born. Admiral Jack Morrison descended into the underground facility on Mars. The elevator dropped for nearly 10 minutes, going deeper than any official records showed. Lara Briggs stood beside him, along with a small team of officers who had been cleared for the highest security level. When the doors opened, Jack stopped breathing for a moment. The chamber was enormous. It stretched so far that he could not see the other end. The ceiling was lost in shadows high above, and filling this impossible space were ships. Thousands of ships hanging in magnetic cradles, waiting in silence. These were not the small frigates and modest cruisers that humanity showed to the galaxy. These ships were different. They were sleek and angular, with sharp edges that seemed designed to cut through space itself. They looked predatory, dangerous. Hungry. Dr. Megan Walsh greeted them at the entrance. She was an older woman with white hair and gentle eyes that hid a fierce intelligence. She had dedicated her entire life to this project. Her parents had worked on it before her, her grandparents before them. "Welcome to Site 7, Megan said. "This is one of 12 hidden facilities across human space. What you see here is the result of 150 years of secret research and construction." Jack walked toward the nearest ship. Up close, it was even more impressive. The hull seemed to absorb light. The weapon systems were unlike anything in the official Terran fleet. "We call them Reapers," Megan explained. "Each one is faster, stronger, and more heavily armed than anything the Valdari have. The technology comes from two sources. The first is our own innovation. Human scientists working in secret, free from the restrictions we show the galaxy. And the second source?" Lara asked. Megan smiled. "The precursors. The precursors were the great mystery of galactic history. They were an ancient civilization that had existed long before the Valdari. According to official history, the Valdari had destroyed them 50,000 years ago. It was this victory that established Valdari dominance. It was the foundation of their power. But the official history was a lie. The Valdari did not destroy the precursors," Megan said. "We found evidence of this decades ago, in ruins that the Valdari thought were empty. The truth is that the precursors destroyed themselves in a civil war. By the time the Valdari arrived, there was nothing left but ruins and corpses." She led them deeper into the facility, past rows of waiting Reapers. The Valdari found precursor technology and claimed it as proof of their victory. But they never understood it. They never improved it. Their weapons today are the same weapons they had 40,000 years ago. They have been standing still while the galaxy feared them. "And we have not been standing still," Jack said. "No, we have not. We studied the precursor ruins in secret. We reverse-engineered their technology. We improved upon it. And we built." She stopped in front of a display showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the location of hidden human facilities. 12,000 Reapers across all sites. Hidden shipyards that can produce more. Weapons platforms disguised as mining stations and research outposts. The galaxy thinks humanity has a fleet of 500 ships. The truth is closer to 15,000. Lara shook her head in amazement. "How did we keep this secret for so long?" "Carefully. Very carefully. Everyone who works on the Omega Protocol knows the stakes. One leak, one mistake, and the Valdari would have destroyed us before we were ready. So we waited. We built. We prepared." Megan led them to a separate chamber, smaller than the main hangar but still impressive. In the center sat a device unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It was spherical, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and move when he looked at them directly. Warning signs surrounded it in every human language. "This is the part one hoped we would never need," Megan said quietly. "We call it the Echo." She activated a display that showed technical specifications. Jack understood enough to feel his blood run cold. The Echo is a weapon that tears holes in space and time itself. When activated, it creates a cascade reaction that destabilizes the fabric of reality in a localized area. The effect is total destruction, not just of ships or buildings, but of everything. Matter, energy, even the space they occupy. "A doomsday weapon?" Jack whispered. "A deterrent. We have 47 Echoes positioned throughout the galaxy. They are completely undetectable by any known technology. If the Valdari destroy Earth, we can destroy everything they have ever built. Every world, every station, every ship. We can end their civilization with a single command." The room was silent. The weight of what Megan was describing pressed down on all of them. "We built these weapons to prevent war," Megan continued. "The Valdari rule through fear. They believe no one can hurt them. But we can. We can hurt them in ways they cannot imagine. And when they understand that, when they truly understand what we can do, they will have a choice. Leave us alone or die with us." Jack stared at the Echo. It hummed softly, as if aware of his presence. "You are asking us to threaten the entire galaxy with extinction." Megan met his eyes. "I am asking us to survive. The Valdari have given us two choices. Surrender and become slaves, or fight and die. The Omega Protocol gives us a third choice. Make them afraid. Make them understand that destroying humanity will cost them everything." She turned back to the weapon. "Sometimes, Admiral, peace can only come from strength. And sometimes, the only way to stop a monster is to become something even more terrifying." Jack looked at his officers. He saw fear in their eyes, but he also saw determination. He saw hope. Humanity had spent 150 years building their secret strength. Now it was time to show the galaxy what they had created. The Valdari wanted humanity to fear them. They were about to learn what fear truly meant. The Valdari did not believe 40,000 years of dominance had made them blind. They had watched President Carter's broadcast. They had seen the footage of the Reaper fleet. They had heard the threat of the Echo weapons. And they had convinced themselves it was all a lie. Supreme Commander Kethral stood before the War Council on Valdari Prime. His generals and admirals surrounded him, their scaled faces showing various levels of doubt and concern. "The humans are clever," Kethral admitted. "They have created impressive footage. But it is impossible for such a young species to have built such weapons without our knowledge. Our spies are everywhere. Our sensors cover every sector. If the humans had 12,000 warships, we would have seen them." Admiral Vex raised a cautious hand. "Supreme Commander, our scouts have confirmed unusual energy readings near the Sol system. There may be truth to some of their claims." Kethral dismissed this with a wave. "Some hidden bases, perhaps. A few hundred ships at most. They have exaggerated their numbers 100 times over to frighten us. This is what prey does when cornered. It puffs itself up and makes loud noises." He looked around the chamber. "The Valdari do not retreat from prey. We do not apologize to inferior species. If we show weakness now, every species in the galaxy will begin to question our authority. We must crush the humans completely and publicly, to remind the galaxy what happens to those who defy us." The council voted to proceed with the attack. On day 31 of the ultimatum, the Valdari fleet entered the Sol system. Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance. The ship had been secretly upgraded with Reaper technology. It was no longer the modest cruiser that official records showed. It was now a predator wearing the skin of prey. Lavra Briggs stood at the tactical station, watching the enemy approach on the holographic display. 8,300 ships confirmed, she reported. They are approaching in standard Voldari formation. Arrogant as ever. Jack nodded. The Valdari used the same battle formations they had used for millennia. They saw no need to change. Nothing had ever challenged them seriously before. Let them come deep into the system, Jack ordered. I want them fully committed before we spring the trap. Send the signal to all Reaper groups. Prepare for emergence on my command. Across the solar system, in hidden bases beneath moons and inside hollowed asteroids, human crews powered up their ships. 12,000 Reapers hummed to life, ready for the moment they had been built for. Supreme Commander Kethral broadcast his message as his fleet approached Earth. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, largest warship in the galaxy. Humans of Earth. His translated voice boomed across all frequencies. Your bluff has failed. Your desperate lies have not fooled us. Now you will learn what happens to species that defy the Valdari. Your world will burn. Your colonies will be sterilized. Your species will be erased from history. Jack smiled grimly at the transmission. He really believes it. He has never been wrong before, Lavra said. This will be educational for him. Jack keyed the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Open the gates. Across the solar system, hidden platforms activated. Wormhole generators, technology far beyond what the galaxy thought humans possessed, tore holes in space itself. And from those holes came the Reaper fleet. Ships emerged by the hundreds, then by the thousands. They appeared behind the Valdari fleet, beside it, above and below it. Within 60 seconds, 12,000 human warships had materialized in perfect formation, surrounding the enemy on all sides. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Kethral stood frozen. His officers were screaming reports at him, but he could not process what he was seeing. The holographic display showed his fleet completely encircled. The human ships outnumbered his own, and they were not the primitive vessels he had expected. These were something else entirely. This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Force, Jack broadcast. You have entered human territory with hostile intent. You have exactly 60 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender unconditionally. Kethral found his voice. Rage replaced shock in his ancient mind. The humans had surprised him, but the Valdari were still the masters of galactic warfare. His ships had destroyed countless enemies before. They would do so again. All ships, attack formation, he commanded. Destroy them all. The Valdari fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons that had burned worlds lit up the darkness of space. Missile batteries launched thousands of warheads. The full fury of the galaxy's greatest military power was unleashed on the human fleet, and the humans barely noticed. Reaper shields absorbed. The Valdari barrage like rain falling on stone. The enemy weapons, unchanged for 40,000 years, simply could not penetrate human defenses. Kethral watched in disbelief as his fleet's attack had almost no effect. Return fire, Jack ordered calmly. Prioritize their command ships. The Reapers responded. Their weapons were not based on plasma or missiles. They fired beams of energy that cut through Valdari armor like paper. Human targeting systems, guided by artificial intelligence, struck with surgical precision. Every shot hit exactly where it would cause maximum damage. In the first 10 minutes, 500 Valdari ships were destroyed. Kethral screamed orders at his officers. He commanded different formations, different tactics, different approaches. Nothing worked. The humans anticipated every move. Their ships were faster, more maneuverable, more deadly. They fought with a coordination that seemed impossible. Admiral Vex's ship exploded in a brilliant flash. A moment later, General Vex Steele's cruiser followed. One by one, the commanders who had voted for this attack were paying for their arrogance. The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of desperate Valdari attacks and calm human responses. 4 hours of watching the greatest fleet in galactic history be systematically dismantled. When it was over, 6,000 Valdari ships were debris. The remaining 2,000 had surrendered. Supreme Commander Kethro was among the captured. Found hiding in an escape pod after his flagship was destroyed, Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, surrounded by the wreckage of the enemy fleet. He felt no joy, only exhaustion and a grim determination. "Send word to Earth," he said. "The solar system is secure, but the war is not over." He was right. The Valdari had colonies and fleets throughout the galaxy. Destroying one armada was not enough. Humanity needed to break the Dominion's will to fight. Over the next several weeks, human task forces struck at Valdari installations across 40 star systems. They moved faster than the enemy could react. They hit targets the Valdari thought were secret. They destroyed shipyards, fuel depots, and military bases. The galaxy watched in amazement. The species they had thought was weak was dismantling an empire that had ruled for 40,000 years. But some Valdari refused to surrender. They gathered their remaining forces at 3 fortress worlds, determined to make a final stand. Each fortress was heavily defended, protected by thousands of weapons platforms and millions of soldiers. The Valdari commanders there believed they could hold out. They believed that, eventually, humanity would tire of war and negotiate. They were wrong. President Daniel Carter made the decision himself. He did not make it lightly. He spent a full night alone, staring at the stars and thinking about what he was about to do. Then he gave the order. 3 echo devices activated simultaneously. On 3 different worlds, space and time tore apart. The fortress worlds did not just explode. They ceased to exist. The stars they orbited flickered and destabilized. Everything within the affected areas simply vanished, leaving behind only gravitational scars where planets had once been. 6 billion Valdari died in those 3 moments. It was the largest loss of life in galactic history. Daniel Carter addressed the galaxy again, his face showing the weight of what he had done. "We did not want this," he said. "We asked for peace. We asked for respect. We were refused. We warned the Valdari what would happen if they attacked. They did not listen." He paused. "The echo weapons are still in position throughout the galaxy. We could destroy every Valdari world. We could end their species entirely. But that is not what we want. We want peace. We want to live alongside the other species of this galaxy as equals. Nothing more." His voice hardened. "But make no mistake. If the Valdari continue this war, we will continue to respond. And if anyone else in this galaxy thinks they can threaten humanity and escape consequence, remember what you have seen today." The message was clear. Humanity had shown they could destroy everything, but they had chosen restraint. They had proven their power and offered mercy to those who accepted it. The remaining Valdari leadership understood. They had no choice. On day 97 of the war, the Valdari Dominion surrendered unconditionally. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. Supreme Commander Kethro stood in chains before a tribunal on Earth. The courtroom was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Some had been victims of the Valdari for centuries. Others had simply watched in silence while the Dominion terrorized the galaxy. All of them had come to see justice. Kethro looked smaller than he had in his broadcasts. Without his fleet, without his power, he was just an old reptile facing the consequences of 3,000 years of cruelty. The charges were read aloud. Genocide against 17 species. The destruction of 42 inhabited worlds. The enslavement of billions. The list went on for nearly an hour. Kethril offered no defense. He showed no remorse. When asked if he had anything to say, he simply stared at the human judge with contempt. "You think you have won," he said, "but you have only changed masters. In 1,000 years, humanity will be just like us. Power corrupts all species eventually." The judge, a calm woman named Patricia Cole, looked at him for a long moment. "Perhaps," she said, "but today is not 1,000 years from now. Today is about what you did, not what we might become." The sentence was death. Kethril was executed on the steps of his own palace on Valdari Prime, broadcast across the galaxy for all to see. It was not pretty. It was not dignified. But it was justice of a kind that the galaxy had not seen in 40,000 years. The Valdari Dominion was formally dissolved. Their territories were divided among the species they had conquered and oppressed. Their military was disbanded permanently. The remaining Valdari were allowed to live, but they would never again hold power over others. Some said humanity was too merciful. Some said they were not merciful enough. The truth was somewhere in between. In the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Derek Hayes addressed the assembly. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a voice that carried well. He had spent his career building bridges between species. Now he had to build something far more important. For thousands of years, this galaxy has been ruled by fear, Derek began. The Valdari sat at the top, and everyone else lived in terror of displeasing them. That era is over. But simply removing the Valdari is not enough. If we want lasting peace, we need to build something new. He looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many eyes. Fear of humanity now. Fear that one tyrant had simply been replaced by another. I know what many of you are thinking. You watched us destroy the most powerful empire in galactic history. You saw us use weapons that can tear apart star systems. And you wonder if we are any better than the Valdari. Derek paused. It is a fair question. And here is my answer. Yes, we have power. More power than any species should probably have. But power is not the same as intention. The Valdari used their power to dominate and destroy because they enjoyed it. They wanted to rule. They wanted others to bow. His voice softened. We do not want that. We never wanted that. We built our weapons because we had no choice. We used them because the Valdari forced us to. And now that the war is over, we want only one thing. To live in a galaxy where no species has to fear destruction simply for existing. He outlined humanity's proposal. A reformed galactic concord with new rules. No species would be allowed to threaten another with extinction. All members would be required to defend any member under attack. The strong would protect the weak instead of preying on them. The reactions were mixed. Some species embraced the proposal eagerly. They had waited millennia for someone to stand up to the Valdari, and humanity had done what no one else could. Others were skeptical. They had seen empires rise and fall before. Pretty words at the beginning often turned to tyranny in the end. But in the end, the proposal passed. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do. They had also seen what humanity chose not to do. When the Valdari surrendered, the humans could have destroyed them all. They did not. That restraint meant something. Over the following decades, the galaxy transformed. Species that had lived in fear for thousands of years discovered freedom. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Valdari opened to everyone. Worlds that had been forbidden became accessible. Science and art flourished in ways they never had under the Dominion's shadow. Humanity remained powerful, but they used their power carefully. They kept their Reaper fleet, but reduced its size. They maintained the echo weapons, but made clear they would only be used as a last resort against existential threats. They took their place among the galactic community not as conquerors, but as guardians. Not everyone was happy with the new order. Some species resented humanity's rise. Some believed the humans were simply biding their time before revealing their true nature. Old prejudices died hard, but for most of the galaxy, the change was welcome. For the first time in 40,000 years, people could look at the stars without fear. Admiral Jack Morrison retired 5 years after the war. He had served his species well, but the fighting had taken its toll. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He bought a small house in the mountains of Colorado, far from the cities and the politics and the endless debates about humanity's role in the galaxy. He spent his days reading and gardening and watching the sky. Lara Briggs visited him often. She had been promoted to admiral herself and now commanded the defense fleet. But she made time for her old friend. One evening, they sat on his porch watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, colors that seemed impossible. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Jack asked. It was a question he had asked himself many times. Lara considered it carefully. "I think we did what we had to do. The Voldari were not going to let us live. They made that clear. We could surrender and die slowly, or we could fight and maybe survive. We chose to fight. But the echo weapons. 6 billion lives." Lara was silent for a moment. "I know. I think about it too. But they were going to kill 42 billion of us. Every human everywhere. Men, women, children. All of us. The Voldari made that choice, not us." Jack nodded slowly. He had told himself the same thing many times. Sometimes he even believed it. "What about the future?" he asked. Kethral said power corrupts all species eventually. What if he was right? What if humanity becomes what we fought against? Lara smiled. "Then I suppose someone will have to stop us. Just like we stopped them." She looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "But I do not think that will happen. We remember what it was like to be weak. We remember what it felt like when the galaxy abandoned us. We remember the fear and the desperation and the knowledge that we might not survive. That memory will keep us honest, I think. At least for a while." Jack followed her gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled the trade routes. Human diplomats negotiated peace treaties. Human scientists worked alongside aliens who had once ignored humanity's pleas for help. The galaxy was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings and the occasional crisis that threatened to spiral out of control. That was the nature of intelligent life. Different species with different needs would always find reasons to disagree, but there was also hope. For the first time in 40,000 years, hope was something the galaxy could afford to feel. Humanity had sent its message to the stars. They were not prey. They were not victims. They were survivors who had learned the universe's hardest lesson. Sometimes, peace could only be won by those willing to wage war. Sometimes, the only way to stop a bully was to show them what happened when they picked the wrong target. And sometimes, the youngest species in the galaxy turned out to be the most dangerous of all. Jack watched the stars twinkle in the growing darkness. Somewhere out there, the future was being written. And for the first time in human history, humanity would help write it. The war was over. The hard work of peace was just beginning. But if there was one thing humans were good at, it was rising to meet impossible challenges. They always had been. They always would be. And the galaxy would never forget the day a small blue planet sent its message to the stars and changed everything forever.